Ladies and gentlemen, welcome again. My name is Amanda Tan, and I'm a student from the Faculty of Business. Welcome to U Alive. Today's event is organized by the NUS Office of Alumni Relations. The program today is in 3 sections. Firstly, a 10-minute talk by our speaker, Mr. Zulkifli Bin Baharudin, and followed by a 20-minute interview with Viswa Sadasivan, chairman of the U Alive Organizing Committee, and finally, a 30-minute Q&A session. If you wish to ask a question, please make your way to the microphones placed along the aisles, introduce yourself, and then speak directly into them. This is essential so that the online community is able to hear your question. Today, we will be using Pigeonhole Live for our Q&A sessions as well. If you have a smartphone, a tablet, or a laptop computer with you, just launch your internet browser and go to phlive.at. Key in our event passcode, which is UAlive. I repeat, it is UALIVE, UAlive. Click go, and you're free to fire away all your burning questions, while also voting for any question that interests you. The more popular questions with more votes will stand a higher chance to be answered by our speakers. Also, do remember to leave your feedback on the Pigeonhole application after the show. Thank you for your kind attention, and please sit back and enjoy.
Alive.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome our speaker, Mr. Zulkifli Bin Baharudin.
Very good evening. Thank you for making time to be here with me. I didn't expect many of you to be here. I don't think I'll be a center of attraction for some of you. But nevertheless, I'm quite happy to be here, firstly, because I think I've stayed away from NUS for a bit too long. I think it's about time that I make my visit here. And the only problem is that the last time I was shared a stage with Viswa, I got into trouble. Not for what I said, but for what I didn't say. So you can imagine what kind of trouble I will get myself into today. But before I start, I'd just like to make a few qualifiers, and that is, I'm still a passionate supporter of mercy relief. I'm a council member of Red Cross, so whatever I say today, please do support them, as I still do. I will tell you why I need a qualifier. The second thing I thought I wanted to do is to declare certain things which have not been made public in the past. A bit about the background of the organization. It was a faith-based organization, Muslim founded, and one day I got a call and PM said, come and see me. I know when you see him, you don't get jobs, you don't get money. I mean, you get job, but you don't get money that comes with it, that should come with it. And they said, you become chairman of this organization. And he said something which I couldn't declare publicly in the past, and he said, 1, this is a Muslim-based organization, but you make it national, or better still international. But maintain the links with the Muslims. But if you were to create an organization that is like any other you've seen in Singapore, you would have failed. But he allowed me to do whatever I want other than that, so I changed the organization. But instead of keeping the Muslims, I decided to bring in all the other religion, IRO, and the only the only religious member of the board happened to be Sister Teresa, a Catholic, not a Muslim. So I was trying my luck to see whether I got away with it, which I did. But he said a few things which remain important to us. I was wondering why he's interested in it. He said, remember that our wealth brings with it obligations around the region. At that time, we didn't know about tsunami, but he felt we needed an organization which could then project our responsibility towards the region, because we're living in an area where there's a lot of disaster and chaos. That was all that he said, and I said, okay. And the tsunami came, and you saw. And one other thing I thought, when I was with him and the tsunami came, 2, 3, 4, on the 4th day, and they saw a very shining chopper and all that, and none of them had that resources. And the minister asked me, ask your boss whether we can mobilize and settle your choppers here. It's not easy because you need the armed forces to remain. But I think PM Lee at that time didn't think about all those things. He just decided to say yes because he was speaking from the heart. He didn't realize how difficult it was to station a whole military force for a long period of time. But that's another story. But I thought I want to give this as a background to show that how passionate he is about it. The other person I should make public is that at the end of it all, President Nathan saw me and he said, Zul, you should make public what you did. Write a book for all Singaporeans, but with one condition. No mention of your name, no photographs of what you did. It belongs to all Singaporeans. It does not belong to you because you've been so synonymous. And he said, you should actually step down, which I did. So here's a great man who felt that you have come to a stage where the institution belongs to all Singaporeans, and there are certain things you need to do, you have to do it. And I think these two gentlemen, I want to declare publicly how I met former President Nathan a few days ago, and he's still passionate about it. But what I'm going to do over the next few minutes is to share with you inside me certain things that I was passionate about because of this, but perhaps didn't quite achieve it. And not because of anything, because we have in us certain things which is a serious impediment to greatness. First, I wanted to create an organization that belongs to all Singaporeans. That means you don't have to be a member organization. You can come in for a day, you come in for a week, you come in for 1 hour, you come in for 2 hours. I did it with much difficulty, but through a series of stories, I tell you how difficult it is. The office had 4 persons who were paid employees, but I told them, your job is to facilitate. You will never be heroes of the organization. The face of the organization are ordinary Singaporeans, even non-Singaporeans. If they want to contribute, so be it. They put on a vest, they work for Singapore, so be it. They come back, they're hero, but not the paid employees. Until the day I left, some 5, 6 years later, I think most of the employees disliked me because one of them came to me, you've never acknowledged our work, you've never publicly said good things about us. I said, no, it is about all Singaporeans, not about any of you, especially when you're paid. What about those people who give up their jobs for weeks, give their holidays and things like that? They should be acknowledged. They are the real heroes. If you don't get it, I think something is wrong. The problem is that we had a very great organization. People did all the right things, all the good things. But the moment you become good, the moment you've done exceedingly well, you stop doing better. You just stop at being good, and that prevents you from being great or being exceptional. Because to progress from being good to exceptional needs a lot of things which we are not comfortable with. We are not prepared to shed our skin. We are our own greatest enemy, and success is our greatest failure. I tell you why. When I get a volunteer and I said, here is $50,000, and one of the gentlemen here knows, Keng Soon, here's $50,000, go and do something. And the staff will tell me, why do you give him money? We don't trust him, he's a volunteer. By my answer, why should I trust you, an admin assistant, and not trust somebody who's far more reputable with money? Why should I? Just because you're staff? If you are working anywhere in Singapore, you understand how difficult it is. But I said, I took the risk, go and do it. All right? And it's not just between organization and volunteers. Even amongst volunteers, I've had 2 cases where I had to tell a high-profile doctor, pack up your bags and go home. Because when you move as a group, I have to have young people maybe to cook, young people to be drivers, some people to guide you. And if they're team leader, I said, you listen to the boss. If the boss is a 20-year-old guy, so be it. You cut and sew, and he looks after your comfort. But if you don't take his instructions, you cannot respect him, no matter what. He's young, and you think you're a great surgeon. I can't help you. And I said, pack up your bags and go, because you have not understood. What is it they have not understood? And what I'm telling you about my experience is not about Mercy Relief. It's not about Red Cross. It's about Singapore. It's that we have come to feel very comfortable about certain things, for us to move on, to not respect of certain organizational structure. We are uncomfortable with it. But to move on precisely requires us to go beyond that. Why? Because bureaucracy has always been used because we don't trust. And because we don't trust, we don't empower. And because we don't trust, we don't empower, we cannot create great organization. Because great organization depends on the power of people to want to do extraordinary things. Bureaucracy can only do things, ordinary things, maybe great things, but not extraordinary things. So for me to want to create an organization as a mass movement, very much like Medicine Sans Frontier, I think we did it for a while, but the moment somebody up there is not there or did not want to push the agenda, you don't have enough people to understand that. I think that's where the danger, then we comfortably, cozily fall into bureaucracy. For example, the moment nobody there is there to push volunteerism, what happens? You have a big organization, employ 20 people, high salaries, do all the great things, yes. But I challenged them, I said, what if you start on the basis, ideologically, that as an organization, Mercy Relief or Red Cross, should never exist. Why? Because in the ideal state, you should not have disasters. You should only have it when it happens, right? But even when it happens, you only exist if Singaporeans want you to continue. If Singaporeans decide, I don't want to do it, so be it. Because the alternative is that the organization will be driven by paid employees whose job is for their own self-interest to keep themselves paid. And then what happens? They will do the normal things, choose people of the same mold, do the, and therefore, this is the kind of trap that we found ourselves. And therefore, when I said messiness, when the organization was staffed by volunteers, yes, it's messy. I tell you how messy it is. Somebody came to me and said, the houses you built don't look very nice compared to those other organizations. I said, yes, they don't look nice. So what's the problem with that? They question you, they can build nice houses. Why don't I said, I tell you, let them question me. Why? I don't build houses for people. Nobody has ever built their houses that was torn down. They've always built their own houses. I give them wood, I give them nails, I give them everything. You want to build your house? You will go and build it. If you don't want, so be it. I'm not going to give a key to a bungalow, That's not my purpose. If others want to do it, so be it. Because they don't understand our purpose is to get hope only if they wish to have them. Not my job to get hard-earned money from you to give them a nice house. You see, they can't understand that ideology. So I'd rather live with the messiness. I'd rather people tell me the house is not so nice so long as the house is built by the owner themselves. If the owner doesn't want it, so be it. Let me tell you a very funny story about bureaucracy. And I tell you how it's in every one of us. At the later phase of the disaster, we had the opportunity to send young people. When young people means they are not independent, so they are maybe 15, 16 years old and older. Spend there for a week. Some has to cook, some has to, I think, knock some nails, some have to do. They feel very good that they've built a house or something without realizing. They all come back a hero without realizing that I keep telling them, It's what you learn that's far more precious than what you give. If you start thinking like hero, then you're wrong. You've not learned anything. Anyway, came this girl whose job was to cook that week, and I happened to be with the Speaker of Parliament to make a visit. And we paid a visit to the late governor, and he said, Zul, I'm very impressed with the people. They're extremely honest, extremely organized, at a very young age. He said, what do you mean? I said, there was this girl who was supposed to go marketing. My wife helped them go to the market, and she forgot certain things, chili. She came back subsequently, went to the lady, and asked the lady, can I have some more chili? Because I didn't buy enough chilies for the first time. And when the lady gave her the chili, she asked, this is a, 14-year-old girl, asked the lady, can you give me a receipt? In a market in Medan. So we have never given receipt to anybody. What do you want a receipt for? Because obviously, because she has to account for it. Yes, but you see, the bureaucracy is in each of us that even at a very young age, we may not realize it's become part and parcel of our DNA. While that bureaucracy has served us well, that same bureaucracy, if not careful, will be a great impediment for us to achieve bigger things in life. So the bottom line is we have achieved great things, just like the organization that I'm involved with, Mr Zulkifli Cross. But I think we fall into a trap where we can even be far greater, far bigger. But what is required of us is not the things that we are comfortable with. What is required of us now is to be brave, to do the things we've never done before, to fail. It doesn't really matter, because deep inside, I believe that everybody wants to do good, and if you don't fail, you will never succeed. When I send somebody out for mission, I do not send him to succeed. If you get a surgeon, you get somebody high, I send him with a 50% chance of success, probably with a 50% chance of failure. Why? Why do you think a surgeon from Mount E wants to give up 1 week of his time, or Keng Su wants to give a few months of his time or whatever to do something, unless it is something far greater than he could achieve sitting in the clinic? And what is that far greater? Something big, something extraordinary, of course something risky. If you give him something so simple, what's the big difference? He wouldn't want to do it. So I would send somebody for that purpose, but you can imagine how difficult it is for me to try and justify the board, justify the staff who says, Zul, you're making a biggest mistake. We will all get into trouble precisely because of you. And everything has been easy for me until the day I left. I was surrounded by staff and members of the board and said, there's one thing you did, which is to take too much risk. We are very uncomfortable with you. Every day we are nervous if something is going to happen. And I said to them, what is life about if you just think of what and plan for what you can achieve? It is when you start to plan for something that you cannot achieve, something far bigger, that we can prosper and progress. What I want to tell you today, my experience both in organization and in some of the companies I represent, my own as well as government, has shown me great similarities of the kind of impediments that we are faced. Like I said, ideologically, we are almost at a midlife crisis, requiring us to make those brave choices we have never been prepared for. But I think only good values and goodwill will guide us to greater things ahead. Thank you.
Zul, thank you. As you were talking, one of the key things that came to my mind, a word that kept coming to my mind, I'm not sure whether it's the word that you used, but it's about trust, isn't it? And I couldn't help thinking about not just mercy relief or volunteerism. I guess I couldn't help reflecting on Singapore. And my own perspective, as you were talking just now, was one of the biggest challenges that we will face in the years ahead is the consequence of the unwillingness to trust beyond the trusted few. You know what I'm saying? There is a tendency for us to trust those who have had a track record. But if you only trust those who have a track record, who have had a track record, you're not going to invest in others, right? Mathematically, you're not going to. Then what's going to happen when the trusted people move on? And I think this is a big dilemma, a big challenge we are facing. And the reason why I think we're facing this, and you alluded to that, is because of a certain preoccupation, a certain predisposition, perhaps at a cellular level, that prevents us from accepting the possibility of failing. You know what I mean? I mean, you can call it kiasu or whatever, but I think it's deeper than that. Huh? We are afraid, actually, of failing. We are afraid of admitting that we have the capacity not to succeed. Therefore, we operate within a realm that is familiar. And that is a very risky position to be in. And I couldn't help thinking about that as you were sharing your experience, because at the end of the day, if that's our predisposition, we will keep putting people in positions of leadership, people who are like us, people who think like us and operate like us, and that means the catchment automatically shrinks, right? And then we start saying that we don't have enough talent because we have chosen to define talent very narrowly. That may have worked for us. In fact, that may very well have contributed significantly to where we are today for the journey. But going forward, the landscape has changed. And I guess that's what you were alluding to. I mean, tell me if I've got you right.
Next year, Singapore 50 years old, or 50 years young. We created a system that has matured for 50 years and has served us well. How? A system that sees the good and the bad, clearly. Because 50 years ago, people were less educated, the value system was not so strong. But 50 years now, I look at you, you are better educated, not only in your brains, I'm sure you go through 16 years, 20 years of, have a certain sense of values of what is right and wrong, but you still serve by a system that, from very beginning, on the basis, the principle of the system is that I do not trust you until you prove otherwise. My point is, as Singapore needs to transform to become, I think Singapore has the potential of becoming not just a great nation, but an exceptional city-state of the world in the future, an exceptional city. But for us to get there, and for us to harness the energy that we have, and we have prepared our people for so long, is to start by first trusting people. And the principle is to trust first, and distrust them when they prove otherwise, not the reverse.
No, but should you even distrust them if they prove? I mean, when you say prove otherwise, are you suggesting that if you trust them and they fail, you should distrust them?
No, I still think
I hope not.
No, I still think you need a system whereby you can sieve. I don't assume you cannot have, you'll get away from the system altogether. The system must be there to sieve those who can be empowered, can be given more free play, and those who you think need to be managed. But it must start with a basis that you trust everyone. And you see how different we are where we are today. You go anywhere, to government departments, to anywhere, even private companies, wherever you apply for something, the first thing is they do not trust you until you prove otherwise.
I mean, if you go to a bank, they ask for track record before they give you the money.
So I'm not talking about just a system. Don't get me wrong. I think it has become our internal DNA in each and every one of us. We do not trust somebody. So how do we transform? It's got to start with the individual. It starts with a small little community. It starts with society as a whole, with a country. But that change has to happen. I mean, in the last 15 years, I used to spend first 15 years, I was a bureaucrat. I spent first part of my life as a bureaucrat looking at Singapore from inside out, the last 15 years, I've spent most of my time out. I am still looking at Singapore from outside in. The view is very different. Singapore has changed, but I didn't realize that I have changed, and I've seen how people look at me, I look at myself, who I really am are three different things, and I think I've changed how I look at myself even. And that's because of the ability to see things from the outside in. And one of the things I am very amazed is that you look at Nordic countries, there are 5 million people, 6 million people, they can achieve far more. They can put 150 companies all over the world and not employ a single of their national. I used to work for an American company. They trusted me 100%. I looked after the company. But when Singapore companies want to go abroad and we want to acquire, we must have more than 51%. We don't have a CEO, never mind, but make sure the CFO is a Singaporean. Why? Because we don't trust. If you don't trust, why do business with them? So that trust is something that if you don't start from within, amongst ourselves, like the Japanese do it amongst themselves, then how can you look at your friends in Indonesia, in Malaysia, and say, I can trust them? You can't.
But the Japanese don't really trust anyone outside.
At least they trust themselves. That's my point.
So are you saying that looking at Singapore outside in, is that your perspective?
Yes, I don't think we trust one another. You look at Singaporeans, there are 5 countries get together. I've yet to see Singapore companies, when they compete, they gang up, they work together. No, they compete even more fiercely than the others. My partners are non-Singaporean. I compete with Singaporean. Half the time I say, hey, we are both Singaporeans. Why can't we?
That's because all these companies you're talking about are government-linked companies.
Possibly, because they're used to dominate. But my point is, really, you look at your left, you look at your right. If you cannot trust in this place, the guys who are sitting on your left and the guys who are sitting on your right, it's a non-starter. We got to start from within. And that trust is, like I say, is something that we have to build. And only then can you transform Singapore, only can you change bureaucracy. I've given you stories to that effect, but there's one thing I want to mention. That's really the key.
So, moving away from trust per se, if I could ask you this question, from your experience in driving a volunteer organization, volunteer-based or volunteer-driven organization, would you say that when we talk about volunteerism, there's already a dichotomy between the leaders of volunteer organizations and the rest? In other words, when we say volunteers, what you really want is a whole lot of people to be the hands and legs, to go and do the menial work. But anyone can do that. You call anyone, you can do that. But if you want to be a volunteer leader, straight away, there is a lot more restriction. There's a lot more, okay, are you qualified? Are you sure you're aligned? Are you, that's been my experience.
Sure.
Now, why is it that people can't be allowed to volunteer as leaders? Why must that part of it be so restricted in Singapore? I don't sense that that's the experience in other countries.
I think it boils down to, other than trust, it's an issue of ideology. If whether you are a staff, you're a chairman of the board, or members of the board, or you're casual volunteers, you come and go, or members, you're permanent members of the group. If you understand the ideology of the organization, the purpose on which it was founded, and your place within that, I think it's quite easy to maneuver within the operating ideology. If you know your mission, you know what is to be achieved, you know where your roles are and how you fit in. It doesn't matter you can work from home, it doesn't matter you are CEO, it doesn't matter I think you can work. But when you don't understand the operating ideology, which we don't, so what do you mean by volunteer? People say, I just want to do some work, I want to feel good, I want to go there and become myself a hero, I give you my skills and come back. That's not. They don't understand the ideology. Like I started by saying, 1, it is Singapore's interest, because we are wealthy, that we have a responsibility to our neighbors. Not because we want to feel good, But because we are responsible, it's our job to make sure that anything happens around it, so long as we can afford it, we do it. Of course, there are humanitarian reasons for it. But start on the ideology that it's our responsibility to get it right and to get it done. Because one day, when it happens to us, we expect our neighbors to help us. But how many people who run that understand the ideology? Someone told me the reason why they don't understand the ideology is that Singapore is like an answer without a question. We got to where we are without understanding our operating ideology, the trade-offs that we have to make, the choices that we have to make to get where we are. We thought, oh, we are here, we can do whatever we like. Tomorrow is another sunny day. So you're right. We have a problem where we couldn't assemble a whole host of people in different form and shape, like a jigsaw, and still have a perfect picture because we do not share a common ideology. Because ideology is something that we're weak at. It's not something we are taught. It's not something that's part of our life. We take it as given. But going forward, you have to decide, and I think we have to be bound by common ideology, what brings us forward.
I guess part of the reason for that is ideology. When you subscribe to an ideology, it restricts your movement, right? I mean, that's been the thought process. Singapore's ideology, paradoxically, is pragmatism, right? I mean, be pragmatic. Pragmatism allows you to shift directions and shift course according to what...
There are two problems with that. One is pragmatism can get you most of the time only mediocre, perhaps good, but never great, extraordinary. You can never be extraordinary when you're pragmatic. That's one problem. The other problem is ideology is dangerous in any organization. Imagine everybody knows what they want to do and achieve that. How do you run an organization? So the communists want to have one central ideology, and if you want to question that, you'll be put in jail. Others who run organization or country better not have too many intelligent people running with all different ideologies. I think they're very dangerous. So you don't let them, you fit them within a certain, and put an overall bureaucracy around it. It's much easier to control. I'm not saying that's bad. It has served us very well, but it will no longer serve us in the future.
Why wouldn't it?
Because the real world has changed. These guys look how intelligent, how smart they are. They won't accept these things right now.
Oh, these guys?
And they have choices. They don't like Singapore. They can pick up their bags, and tomorrow they are just as perhaps more valuable in Indonesia. And what brings them here is not because Singapore is richer, because one day we may not be as rich, but what keeps them going here is the belief deep inside in the ideology, and they share with their friends, the people they look to the left and to the right.
You know, you mentioned the word, it's our duty just now. I mean, I've met several people in the volunteer service sector who say that you should serve, you should volunteer not because it's your duty, because that sounds like you're doing it out of obligation, but you should volunteer because you want to serve. I know it sounds like semantics, but which do you think is more important in volunteerism going forward? Should you do it because you believe it's your duty to do it, your duty to yourself, duty to your people, to your neighbors, or should you do it just simply because it's the right thing to do? Duty suggests a certain rule-bound, a certain obligation to do something.
I know it's popular, it's quite common to say, why do you do it? Firstly, you feel good, or you feel guilty. That's why you do it. But personally, I don't think that's the reason why you should do it. Perhaps in life, you are motivated by guilt or wanting to do good. But the moment you are a member of society, the moment you're a member of a country, it's not about you, whether you feel good or bad, that matters. You're bound by a collective need, a collective identity. And what's that collective identity? For Singapore, is that we have a moral obligation to do what is right when our neighbors are in trouble. And for leaders, I'm bring back to politics. You can have your official position, you are so and so, but nothing is more important than moral leadership. I know for a fact that I was unpopular. I had to do all those things because at the end of the day, I think I had moral leadership to do what was difficult. But when you do not have moral leadership and you're only fixated with what is good for you, whether sense of guilt or sense of your well-being, you want to be the hero. Yes, but you don't live alone. You see, this country we cannot afford to have people like that here. We must be far greater than that.
Zul, I don't quite understand it. Are we helping our neighbors? Are we there for our neighbors because of a moral obligation, to quote you, or just because that's the right thing to do? I mean, I know it sounds like I'm splitting hairs, but I'm a bit troubled by that. You know, why are we just doing it because it's a moral obligation, or should we just do it because it's the right thing to do? Well, I don't know. I mean, I feel that a lot of the things that we do in society is because there's an obligation, there's a duty. Take national service, you know, we do it because there's a requirement, there's a liability, you know. But why don't we just say that, no, that's the right thing to do. I want to do it.
I would think so.
So what is it?
I would agree with you that it's the right thing to do on a personal level. Fine, I can understand. I wish everybody had that deep inside them. That's the right thing to do, right? But I think my point is that it's really good that everybody have the right sense of values, are motivated by the right thing. Fine. I'm talking about as a society, I think the difference between us and when we get together as a group is that we have an obligation to one another. That's the difference. We don't have an obligation to ourselves, but the moment we put two persons together, we have an obligation to one another. We are neighbors of neighboring countries. We have an obligation to them. And I would like to think they have an obligation to us just as well. That makes society far better, far safer. But the difference is that I'm more driven by the sense of obligation. The reason why I say that is because I think when I travel down the region, I think I feel very sad because we are respected as somebody who's done very well. But it doesn't give me any thrill when somebody say, I respect you for what you have and who you are. I want to be admired. I think Singapore deserves to be admired. And you can only do that if you project the right values to people. And I think Singapore can.
No, but what you just said is even more troubling for me. I'm sorry. Because what you're saying is, we are doing all this because we want to be admired?
Sure.
I thought all along we're doing this because it was the right thing to do, or maybe not as good as because of moral obligation. Now you're saying we are doing it because we want to be admired? Why is it so important to be admired?
And the reason I say why I think we have to progress beyond just somebody respecting you for who you are is when they admire you, is when you know they admire you for, perhaps we are saying the same thing, it's a matter of degree, for doing the right things, projecting the right values, the things that you live by. I mean, you look at somebody like Dalai Lama, what do you look at him for? You admire him for his values, for example. That's the kind of thing that you want to have for yourself. That's the kind of thing Singapore, I think many of you, I see young faces here. I travel 3/4 of my time in the region. I can tell you, they all wish that somewhere in their cities, in their countries, is a little Singapore. Because they really respect us, and they to the point that they're envious about us. But very rarely do I hear them, I really admire you for your values, for what you achieve, for what you have. Because this is not a zero-sum game. I think the transformation of Singapore must go from just being respected for being the wealthy kid on the block to really being embraced as one of them and being admired for what we have achieved. But that transformation is going to be, like I say, very difficult. Difficult until and unless we are prepared to shed away a lot of the things that have become natural part of us.
Okay. I'm still a bit troubled, but never mind. Maybe this is a good time for us to get some questions and comments from the floor. Feel free to ask, challenge, but try and desist making speeches. Huh? Try and avoid making speeches. So, any comments, questions, please? If not, I'll have to call upon King Soon. Or why don't you kick it off, King Soon?
I think your point about moral leadership
Could you use the mic because they can't hear you? And also because King Soon, we are recording this webcam. Can somebody give him a mic, or could you go to the mic, please? King Soon, over there, please, if you don't mind.
I think Zul's point about moral leadership is, I think, the most important point. And I think there's some way to go for Singapore to be able to project that in the region as well as to the world. What is the moral leadership of Singapore? Yeah, I think we are a successful economy. You know, we are a clean and green city. You know, we've got a lot of high-rise buildings, you know, bright and beautiful and so on. But what is the moral leadership? What do we really stand for as a human society? I think that is the question.
Zul?
I think it's a very difficult thing to, I get people from 14 years old right up to those in the 60s who say they want to do good. I think deep inside, I feel almost all, I think they're right. They want to do good. But I think this is something I cannot extract from them. It's that at the end of the day, whether you are a volunteer or you're somebody way up, high up in the hierarchy, I think at the end of the day, you're all leaders. But you are there because there's certain, if I were to use certain word, moral leadership, you are there for that reason. What is it that makes you be able to do that? Because without which, I cannot break the bureaucracy and allow you to do certain things which otherwise I will not be able to do. And this is something that, because we do not value this high enough, we do not put this high up on a priority list, that it get somewhere, it's not a big thing, and therefore it's very hard to surface. And like I say, it's well underneath bureaucracy. Bureaucracy is far more important than anything else in the world. Now, I just give you one example. I just reminded King Soon. Singaporeans, by and large, do not understand. People keep telling me, we have to be efficient and effective, correct? I said, no. Half the time, to be effective, we have to be necessarily inefficient. Because this is relationship building. Try to be effective and efficient when you try to court your woman, your wife. Half the time, it's going to be a very inefficient way of doing things with her, But that's human relationship. You have sometimes to be necessarily inefficient to be effective. But when you have a system like Singapore, where we say you must both be efficient and effective, and people want to go for efficiency, you lose something far bigger you never thought of. That relationship building that comes with efficiency. I mean, those of us who deal with Malaysians, with Indonesians, try to sit down in a meeting and you put your agenda, they put your agenda, and say 1 hour, voila, we have a meeting and that's it. It doesn't work that way. It's going to take a lot of time to develop that. And at the end of the day, if there's a choice between you and them, what is it in the center that they'll say, I'll take you, I'll give it to you? It's that sense, that moral leadership that you have, that you won't play him out, you have his interest with you, and therefore I give it to you. How do we achieve that? It's not an easy question, but I think we have to do it. I don't have the answers, but somewhere deep inside, I think that's the key thing that we must have. I mean, look at Lee Kuan Yew. He did all the things that was, I think in today's example, he would have lost the vote long ago. Lee Kuan Yew would have lost the vote. Lee Kuan Yew probably wouldn't win an election today, even as an SMC. But he did that because he had moral leadership to even do what was nearly impossible to do by today. He had moral leadership.
So are you saying that we've lost it?
I don't see, I think as a sense of leadership, we have lost it because we don't see in the leadership that moral leadership is more important. We don't even judge our leaders by the sense of moral leadership. We judge them by their A-level results and everything else, but not moral leadership, which is far more important. It's crazy. What do you do at the age of 18? They ask you at 55.
Anyone else? See, the silence is because it's very abstract. Huh? Yes, Johnny. Johnny is very good at bringing discussions down to earth.
Well, I guess I'm struggling. On one hand, I think I agree with you that we should move towards a trust-based volunteer kind of organization. But the very fact that, as with many volunteer organizations, charity organizations, the financial is very much dependent on donors, contributions from well-wishers. How do you actually go about trusting people, except for those, a few trusted ones, as what Viswa has said? How do you actually go beyond your trusted friends to move towards an organization or a scenario that it becomes a truly volunteer-based or a trust-based organization, a volunteer organization? At the same time, you have to account to your donors. You have to look at the governance aspects of things. And on one hand, I agree with you. On the other hand, I don't know how you could balance it. And in reality, how do you actually make it work? Thank you. And second point, by the way, I don't totally agree with you that we should think of giving as a duty, because duty tend to imply that it's an obligation. I think we should all think of giving as a privilege. That will come from your heart. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Johnny.
Okay, I probably will not answer your second question because I think that's where we can all disagree or agree and a different of. But your first question is, I think it's a difficult one, precisely because it is difficult to move from one that we are comfortable with to the next. And in fact, the tendency is to stay with this and reinforce that, because you say you collect money from people, they want governance, they want this and that. But there are two things here. First, even with the kind of system that we now have, bureaucracy in companies, fraud happens all the time. So there's no foolproof to say that the current system is the best system to prevent that. I'm not saying that in a trust-based system, you're better off. I don't think so. It may not be initially. But you cannot transform yourself to become a great nation if you do not remove the distrust that is inherent within the system. I will give you two controversial examples, which I think may not be how you look at it. You look at the money changers, how they move money around the world, how they reconcile them. It's all based on complete trust amongst themselves. Yes, amongst themselves, complete trust. For those of you like me who knows what happens with some of the other trade in gold, diamond, silver on a daily basis, where things get traded every day, dominated by the Jewish, I think because of the problems that they had in the past, they had a completely trust-based system of how they manage their business today. So, and it has endured many, many years. We are not talking about those things, but even for even smaller things to start with, we just do not trust our people enough. And we don't take the small steps, the baby steps as needed. You can forget it. I'm telling you that Singapore is on the threshold of being a very great nation. But if you're not prepared to get rid of some of these things, we just remain good. Worse, we become mediocre.
Can you share with us one thing that you think may be necessary for us to move in that direction?
I know I'll get flagged for this, but if I have a choice, I scrap the scholarship system completely. That means I start on the basis, if I take you in at 21 years old, regardless of your qualification, I start on the basis, yes, I can sieve the brighter and non-brighter ones, maybe, based on your potential. But I have a system whereby everybody is on the starting block. You may not get gold, silver, bronze, but you are there on the starting block. I trust you. And of course, there'll be others who will take advantage of the system. There'll be lots of frauds running around, for sure. There'll be more frauds than there is now. But I think the end game is that I think we are far better off, we're far more robust. We cannot be a society that is regulated by rules and regulation. We must be a society that is regulated by ourselves and for common good of others.
But what is wrong with giving people scholarships? If perhaps what we shouldn't do is to not call them scholars.
I give you
You
scholarships.
see, actually, if you think about it, it's a misnomer, isn't it? We've got a member of the Public Service Commission here. Okay?
I see.
You know, I mean, seriously, Zul, I mean, my quick comment on this is, I think the problem is not with giving people scholarships. I think it's good if someone is deserving, you give him a stipend to go out there and get a degree, get a qualification, whatever it is. I don't think the problem is that. The problem is with giving him a label or anointing him with a label that you are special from the moment he's appointed. But you see, he is actually a recipient of a scholarship. But that doesn't make him a scholar. A scholar, as we know it, it means that the person has achieved a certain scholastic ability in a particular domain. And even after getting a degree in Oxford, Cambridge, or Stanford, it doesn't make him a scholar. He needs to work towards scholarship. So I think the problem is not in the money and the scholarship, is in how you label the person, and that label sticks with him or her for life.
No, I agree with you. I'm happy to give scholarships to everybody. What I think, since you asked me the question, something I'll do is that I cannot, in my life, accept a situation where you have only one gate at 18 years old or 20 years old, which determine the rest of your life. I think human nature is such, you may fail to get through the first obstacle, the first gate, but you should make the first gate or other gates open, whether front way, sideways, whichever way. Because what's the ideology? What's the central ideology? The central ideology is to maximize and harness your potential. Number two, you can play the game in different ways, in your own ways. But if the central ideology is only anybody who passes through the first gate, the form and shape that I built, and that's it, one track, and the rest of you play the second division, I don't think that's my vision of future Singapore. And that's the kind of society I want to live in, or the society I want to be part of. And that's why I said what I said.
Anyone else? Yes, please. Could you give us your name and your IC number, please?
I'm Jonathan. I'm an alumni from NUS. I have a comment on splitting hairs. In a way that I feel that it's kind of misleading to, I guess it's wrong in a way to stand in our ivory tower and say, you all should settle your own problems, and we should have some form of duty to actually help the people. But on the other hand, it also seems a little off to stand from ivory tower and say, I'm so generous to give you all these things. You should admire me, you should praise me, you should look up to me. It seems a bit arrogant in a certain degree in looking from that point of view. So I'm wondering whether a better way to look at it is actually to talk about solidarity, to look at it in a perspective of both the giver and the person receiving.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because if you only look from the person who is giving, then it seems, whoa, I'm great. And if you only look at the person who is receiving, then it's, oh, you so poor thing. Which seems rather odd and rather individualized in the sense it contradicts the feeling of community. The second comment I have is about trust, and it seems to me that I feel from my own education that trust is really not there in the sense that teachers are not trusted to teach on their own. They have to follow a certain strict syllabus. They have to follow a certain teaching pedagogy. So they're not trusted to teach. In the same way, students are not trusted to learn, such that they are constantly given tons and tons of assignments so that they are forced to learn, rather than they enjoy trying to learn something on their own and to pick up a topic, pick up a subject based on their interest, based on their passion, but rather forced into a narrow stream of what they should know and what they should learn. Therefore, no one really trusts each other at all. And I think in my own experience of education itself, it seems that I shouldn't trust anybody to do anything right unless there is a proper protocol. That's my opinion of how I see it. That's my, if you care to comment on both of them.
Well, I will not touch on the second one, but the first one on feeling good and obligation. I still keep to what I said, that our special position, our wealth and prosperity brings us, because of that, we have an obligation to others. That's my point. Whether you feel good or not, I don't disagree with you. But my point is that because of who we are, anyone, even in society, if you are wealthier than the rest, you have an obligation. That's my point. Whether you disagree with me, but that's my point. Only when you exercise that obligation, when you're in a better position to do vis-a-vis another person, is when you have moral authority. That's one way of earning moral authority. It's through your sense of obligation toward others. You care for others enough. What's the point of being rich and surrounded by this world when you don't use your wealth to help others, to improve the lives of other people? And you feel good? No, you must be obligated. It's your duty to do it. As a society, I feel strongly about it. Because if Singapore, we are all better off than our neighbors. And therefore, I'm telling you now, individually, collectively, we have an obligation to others who need us. Life is not, let me tell you this, okay? For those, I will tell you the sad fact. For those of us who are a bit older, we have lived through 20 years of unprecedented growth, which will never be repeated again. Let me tell you that. It seems strange today. Many years ago, a prime minister will stand up and say, "This is bad news, my friend. Economic growth is 7%. You'll never hear that story again. Go to Japan and see 20 years of deflation. I have guys in the company who have never seen promotion in their lives. Go to US before that and see what's happening before they had a short bull run. Singapore's unprecedented growth will never be repeated. We are lucky we can still become the shining gem in the region. I'm not so sure, but it will never be repeated. So if you don't do what is right, tomorrow, the guys around you who are far bigger, far more resources, will also not do what is right for you. Don't assume you'll be lucky every day."
Why won't you answer the second question?
I think you served my point. I think even in education, we don't trust people enough. Why can't you trust a teacher to teach a kid? What's the problem with that? So what if the teacher departs from the curriculum 50% of the time? If you believe he's a good teacher, take him on. If you don't believe him, don't hire him. If you hire him, give him that leeway.
Victor, you have savaged a lot of children, a lot of youth. In the many decades of being a teacher, what are your thoughts on this, Victor? I'm putting you in a spot intentionally. Please, why don't you share? Victor Savage, Professor Victor Savage here, is one of the finest professors of geography in the world. So, in the world, okay? Because he's from NUS. If we don't blow our trumpet, who will? So, why wouldn't you? I mean, really, Victor, go to the mic. Share with us. Defend the education system. You're the only one who can. You could end up being pelleted, but you could die a martyr.
I guess my view of education here, and this is partly
about trust and education.
Well, education and trust. I guess our students do very well, academically, etc. But the sort of consistent feedback from mainly expatriate lecturers is that our students don't have academic entrepreneurship. They can regurgitate all the facts and figures, but they're not willing to take the risk to stand by a particular position. And so, obviously, many expatriates, including all the external examiners who we don't have them now, but in the past we had them, were a bit disappointed by that. And I guess we come from a very structured system. Obviously now it's improving, and there are very good students. I'm not saying that there are no good students, but those good students will be good students anywhere in the world. They won't necessarily have to just be good students in Singapore. You could put them in the Harvards and the Yales. But I'm talking about the bulk of the system, and I mean of students, and so that's a great issue. I guess the difference is to some extent cultural. I mean, we were raised, to put it in a way, in a simplistic way, on a very Confucianistic system, which was part of our upbringing in an Asian tradition, where your elders, prescribed the thing and you followed the rule. And you were not allowed to question your elders for anything. And that persisted in schools. Whilst in the West, especially in America, they were raised on a Socratic system. And in the Socratic system, you are all the time asked to question what your teachers say, etc. And your views are accepted because the West has a very great love for individualism, as it were. Whereas here in Asia, there's a great love for conformity, that you follow the rules, you follow traditions, etc. So it's a very difficult thing to say, I mean, you need to change that. It means your culture also has to change to a large extent, and it's not easy. And I mean, when I teach, I can see this. I mean, that I always challenge my students to not write prescribed answers, to always challenge what has been given to you, because I always say I always grade students better if they totally give the opposite view of what I've said, just because I feel it's something I want to encourage. But obviously, to a large extent, many people will say, I taught you this, I expect you to regurgitate what I've taught you, rather than, look for something that's different.
Thank you, Victor.
Let me say something about education which bothers me quite a bit. I think by and large we've educated our people very well. I travel around the world, I can tell you, NUS, SMU students, NTU, they're very good. But I think by the time they go out, especially in the global world, they're so burdened, weighted by, amongst other things, bureaucracy in Singapore. It becomes DNA that they underachieve. I'll give you an example. Today, if you assemble all the President Scholars, Colombo Plan Scholars, all the scholars that we have ever given, it will overfill the indoor stadium. It will overfill the indoor stadium. Where do you expect them to be? I expect them to be head honchos in New York, London, Tokyo, maybe Sydney, Singapore. But even in Singapore, look at our captains of industry. The President Scholars are number 2, number 3, working for Piyush Gupta in the DBS. In SGX, they're number 3, number 4. Where are they? They're not. So what's wrong with them? They're great guys. I've seen them. Brilliant guys going to school. I would expect them, but they work for somebody who's not a scholar, probably don't have a degree. And it's not just one isolated case. Many. We have produced people who should be running all the global cities of the world, but they are not. So what's the difference? That's the difference I'm talking about. The difference that you have a great guy who can be greater and be exceptional, instead of falling down to mediocrity because he suddenly finds that after all being great, I'm actually quite comfortable in a system that I'm quite all right. If our earlier founders of Singapore, Lee Kuan Yew and gang, had been mediocre, had not been exceptional, had tried to follow the system that was left to them by the British, today will be one of the Riau Islands, I'm telling you.
And actually, what's wrong with being one of the Riau Islands? Okay. Just out of curiosity. Okay, we've got some questions that have come online very quickly. Trust is critical, but it must be earned. If it's forced, it's not genuine trust, right? How can Singapore become a culture based on trust without mandating or forcing it?
I think he gave a question with the answers with it. I think you have to go, we have to be brave.
You're sounding more and more like a politician. Are you campaigning?
No, we have to be brave with like I told you, you do this, there'll be more frauds running around. You have to catch more thieves. I hope there'll be, like somebody said, in some countries, the only good guy alive who's not caught is, the only good guy around is those who are not being caught. You don't want that kind of situation. You must believe there are more good guys than bad guys. But if you design a system around bad guys, then you also put the good guys in the same system. So I think we must be prepared to face the consequences of the failure of such a system. You must be prepared to a certain extent. I don't think you can have a foolproof system. And perhaps Singapore is a country where do you want to have a disaster before we learn something in life? Certainly we will learn something in life when there's disaster, but that's not where we want to go. We don't want to learn only when something happens to us. And I think this small price we pay is worth the price.
Another question. Singapore is lucky to be largely natural disaster free. What do you think could be done to encourage greater participation from Singaporeans on humanitarian relief related activities?
I think I've said that, though. I think that structure that you have to be a member, you have to qualify, you have to do all that, is one that's holding us back. I'm very familiar with Morrison Sans Frontier. Today, if you're a doctor, you say you have 2 weeks to give, you can go anywhere, they'll put you, and you're out in 2 weeks, no questions asked. Do we have such an organization? No. I had hoped that Mercy Relief was one of it, but Mercy Relief can be, Red Cross can be, but it can only be if it's prepared to do the things that I said. We are prepared for it. But the fact is, Morrison Sans Frontier did it and succeeded with it. I think we should.
Okay, final question. Bachelor of Science Honours to Chairman of Mercy Relief. Tell us what happened in between. It sounds like an accusation, actually. What happened to you, man? You should have been a research scientist.
I tell
you screwed up your life to become chairman of Mercy Relief.
No, what happened to me is I never wanted to go to building science. I was very passionate about politics and things like that, political science. But I was a poor kid. I wanted to borrow some money, and they said, no, you'll never get a job. You go to HDB, we'll give you a job when you graduate as a valuer or building science graduate. And I thought, I was quite scared, because when I came out in 1984, it was a recession. Some of my friends earned $600 working at Robinson's after getting their honors. I was lucky. I earned a lot of money then, still a lot of money now when I won HDB, but I never liked the job. It was something that I hated the course. I left halfway for scholarship at the time to Japan, at a time when there was no such things as credits and all that. I took risks. Let me tell you this, when I asked my lecturer, can I go on, take a leave? He said, no, you will fail my subject. I said, why should you think I should fail? I've not even taken my exams. And then he said, you'll fail. I said, I will not fail. I told him why. You give me 5 questions, I answer 3. I get 51, I'm done. Then he sat down and stared at me. What are you trying to tell me? I said, look, I go to school, I know what I want. I give the minimum to get what I want. I won't give more than that. And true enough, I sat for 2 Rs and I graduated. I never liked it. But today I tell you what's wrong with it. In my business, I do the least to get what I want. I don't use all my resources. It's stupidity to put all your resources for an unknown outcome. And that's where I said, NUS tried to educate me, but I realized there's some foolishness along the way. Because I was an oddball, they couldn't accept me for that. And today I still tell them they were wrong. Because resources are scarce. Don't ever gamble everything away unless you know what you want. I'm quite happy to just graduate because I want to do my own things in life. I didn't want to do my honors. I didn't want to do my masters because I know what I wanted. Well, that's a path I've taken. I'm proud about it. But the intervention to push me to building science was something I resisted. I never liked it. I never forgave those who did that to me.
Well, I'd like to correct you. You said you were an oddball. You are an oddball. And that's a good thing. I think what Singapore needs is a few more oddballs so that it's better you take the risk than the rest of us. But on a more serious note, one of the purposes of You Alive, and this is the 4th year we're doing it, is really to bring forth people like Zul. The idea is not to have people who are agreeable. The idea is not to bring people who have achieved success in the conventional sense of the word. The idea is not even necessarily to showcase people who have succeeded. The idea is really to showcase people who believe in something. I know in many places that sounds like, what's the big deal? But unfortunately, in Singapore, it's not that often that you find someone who believes in something enough to go out on a limb to do it. I've known Zul for many years. Zul and I don't agree on several things, like duty and service, but they're not fundamental. I admire him for what he's achieved. And I think that's what's important. You don't have to always agree. In fact, it's good not to agree. But it's important to respect. And it's even more important to earn that respect without trying too hard. And I think, Zul, I'm sure I'm speaking for the rest of us, we're very proud of you that you are one of us. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
You want us to hug again? You've got to be very careful with these penguin books and all, these days. Well, we're not going to let you go back empty-handed, so we're going to give you something. So, Zul, here's a picture of us to remind you of who is better looking.
Wow, that's fast.
We shall leave it open.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And here's something else. Here's a picture, and on the right side is empty so that you can write some lovely things about your experience tonight, especially with the moderator. And while he's busy doing that, I'd like to highlight to you next month's speaker is Professor Sia Soon Yan, who is an adjunct professor with the business school. Before that, he was head of McKinsey. I would urge you to seriously consider coming because he has some really interesting and somewhat radical ideas about leadership, possibly even moral leadership. So it's next month. And our speaker for October is Senior Minister of State Indrani Raja, who, as you know, recently chaired the Aspire Committee, right? And our last speaker for the year, for this calendar year, in November, is Yaakob Ibrahim, the Minister for MCI, right? And if you have questions to ask about pulping of books and stuff like that, he's the right person. Don't say I suggested it to you, right? So we've got an interesting lineup for this year. And I think he's taking a long time to write this. Hopefully good things. Are you, Zul? These mercy relief people, long storytellers. He doesn't get the hint, does he?
Yeah.
Could you read it out for us, please?
I thought you.
No, read out. No, you read. I can't read your writing.
This one is a surprise to me. I didn't know.
Tolong. Read, my friend. Yeah. Hi.
This to my alma mater. Thank you for trying to educate me but nothing is ever going to fully prepare us for the future. We have to be brave, guided only by the same stars that have guided our forefathers.
Thank you. Tutelage from Khalil Gibran. All right, guys, please join us outside for some bites. Come.
It's about to follow.
Thank you.
How do you go?
Yes.